Caffeine and Adderall. I'm just kidding. At least partly. It's my final week of classes as an undergrad, and that means it's almost time for finals. So here are 5 tips that help me maintain a 4.0 GPA across 3 different majors. Now, first up is your location. This may seem kind of inconsequential. I mean, you can read or study wherever you want, but I find it extremely helpful to have a dedicated spot where all I do is work and I don't goof off at all. That spot for me is my desk in my apartment. If you don't have a desk or a private spot wherever you're living, there are other alternatives too, such as going to a local library or your campus's library if you're a college student like I am, and making sure that you sit down and do your work. That's the big thing behind this. This should be a spot where all you do is work, whether it be schoolwork or actual work. You don't use this spot to do other stuff. This really helps you stay focused so that way you're actually being efficient with your time. You aren't bouncing back and forth between a million different things. And that brings us to tip number 2, reducing your distractions. The most common way to do this is turn off your phone, or at the very least, put it on silent or mute notifications. I find it very helpful to have my phone on the other side of the room or even out of the room whenever I need to sit down and do work, because otherwise I'm too tempted to respond to messages or go on social media. By doing this, you're able to focus in more on what you actually need to do, and in this case, that's going to be studying. Also, a part of reducing distractions is doing stuff like turning off the TV or YouTube. I know a lot of people like to do work with those in the background, but that's extra information that your brain's trying to process when it should be focused on the work at hand. So shut off that podcast that you're listening to, shut off the TV, make sure that if you have something on, it's something like lo-fi beats to listen to. Don't be listening to music that has lyrics in it, stuff like that. It all just distracts you with that little bit from what you need to do. Another way to reduce distractions is the first tip, having a dedicated work environment. And this is supposed to be a place that's quiet and where you're only doing your work. So if you shut off your phone, shut off all the external noise, and you go and work at a dedicated workspace, you're a lot less likely to be distracted by everything else, and you can actually study. The first 2 tips have really been about setting up your workspace and setting up the environment so that way you can study. But now let's get into how to actually study with tip number 3. Tip number 3 is don't read your notes. I see so many people who study just by rereading the notes that they took in class or reading the professor's notes or their teacher's notes and assuming that that's going to get them through. Research shows that that's one of the least effective ways to study. Instead, you should be going through practice problems, going through old exams and seeing where you messed up and where your strengths were, and working through whatever your weaknesses were. Oftentimes, this will involve coming up with your own problems or getting a separate set of problems for you to work on. Just reading through your notes doesn't really help you retain the information that much, especially if you're doing it the night before an exam. Cramming doesn't help us at all, and in some cases it can even be harmful. So instead of just rereading your notes, here are 3 different study techniques that are going to help you prepare for your final exams a lot more. First up is practice problems. I know that this might seem tedious. You spent the entire year doing practice problems for exams or doing homework that has the same exact problems. But working on these problems is going to help reinforce the information in your head and help you work through whatever kinks that you have. The next is writing out a note card. And I don't mean writing flashcards for every single piece of information that was covered in the course. I mean taking one index card and writing down what you believe to be the most important information. When you're doing this, I want you to pretend that this is a note card or a little cheat sheet that you'd be allowed to bring with you into the exam. If that were the case, what information would you want to write down on it? If you're taking a final for a math course, you might want to have formulas written down. If you're taking a psychology course, you might want to write down some small facts that you don't have ingrained into your memory, and restrict yourself to one little 3x5 note card, because that'll force you to figure out what's actually important and what you would need to know for the final exam. And the act of writing it down helps you to memorize it. Writing stuff down has been shown to help us reinforce our memories and learn better. Last up is spaced repetition. This is the practice of testing yourself on information at spaced out intervals to help you retain it and memorize it in the long run. Reading through something once or twice isn't going to help you truly understand it. What will help you, though, is if you're forced to bring that information up at different intervals throughout time. This is more so if you have a lot more time to prepare for an exam, but basically what you want to do is set out some practice problems on a particular concept that you're struggling in. Then once you set out the problems, study what you need to know for the problems, give it an hour or two, go and do one of the problems. If you got it right, good job. You can move on to the next one in a few more hours. The trick is, after each time that you get one of the questions correct, you space out even more. So instead of waiting 1 hour before going on to the problems, the next time you want to wait 4 or 5 hours. The next time you want to wait overnight. The next time you want to wait 3 days before you move on to the next problem. And lastly, wait a week before you go back and look at the problems. This will help you with your recall of the information as opposed to just memorizing it once and completely forgetting it. And this will help you really have the information down for the future and not just for the class. There are quite a few online programs that help you do this, so look into it or set one up on your own, because this is arguably the most helpful way to actually learn and understand information. Now let's move on to tip number 4. Using external resources. Don't just go with the notes that you have from the class or whatever the professor or teacher has posted online for you. Use everything that's at your disposal. Use online quizzes. Use your professor. Treat them like an outside resource. Go and ask them questions if you need to. Ask them if there's a practice exam or a study guide that they can help you put together. Get those outside resources so that way you have extra practice, essentially. Another outside resource that I'm a huge advocate of is going and getting help from tutors. Most universities have free tutoring for you. Just look online and they'll have hours listed for whatever your discipline is, and you can go and get help with whatever you're struggling with. And tutors love to help people. I'm a tutor myself, and I love when people come to me to prepare for exams because it really does help them in the long run. And tip number 5, take a break. Now again, this might seem counterintuitive to some of you. Why should you take a break in the middle of studying when you can just power through and get 2 or 3 hours of studying done in one sitting? Well, the answer is because you aren't really doing anything after that first hour. Our attention span starts to wane and we're unable to retain nearly as much information. But a simple 3 to 5 minute break every half hour to an hour will replenish your energy and let you refocus when you sit back down to keep studying. A 2-hour study session where you have 2 or 3 5-minute breaks in there is going to be a lot more effective for you in the long run than just sitting there and trying to study straight for 4 hours. Because at that 2, 3, 4 hour mark, you really aren't doing anything to help yourself. You're just making yourself more tired, and all the information that you had retained at the beginning is starting to fade away, trying to keep up with all of this new stuff. So take that 5-minute break. Go grab a drink. If you want to, you can scroll through social media. Get a quick bite to eat. Just do something besides studying. One of my favorite ways to take a break from studying is to find a comfy chair like this, sit down, relax, and meditate for a little bit. This is also important for our health in general, because if we spend several hours just sitting there studying or working, we're putting our bodies in a bad position. We're staring at a computer screen, making our eyes dry out and tired. You need to take a look at something else. You're sitting in a chair, having your shoulders slumped forward, and your back's going to kill you when you finally get up. So take those breaks and make sure that your physical health is going to be in line with your mental health. And those are the 5 study tips that have really helped me get through undergrad and finish up final exams and final papers year after year. Hopefully you found it helpful. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of these tips, if they worked for you, if something else works for you, and let me know what exams you're studying for and what you're worried the most about. Also, let me know if you want to see more study tips and videos like this in the future. If this did help you out, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.